We're going to get it figured out. I swear to God. We're going to do it. I promise. Hi, guys. Are we there? Are we live?
Yes.
Trying to figure it out. I think it is. If we can get some thumbs up with people, get some little waves and hearts. And like, you're here. I'm not sideways anymore, I think. So that'll be great. Yeah, we'll give this a try. Technology. I always have a thing with it. They make it sound so easy. That's the thing, right? You might understand this. They make it sound like it's going to be so simple. Then you try it and it's not really that way. So anyway, hi, welcome. It's Sew Together Tuesday. I'm Teresa Coates. I am the National Educator for Shannon Fabrics, and we are back one more time. We are into November now. Can you even believe that? Like, it is mind-blowing to me. We are already in November. This is the busy season of year for a lot of people. It's especially so for me. Because we have birthdays, so I've got 3 birthdays this month, then Thanksgiving, and then Christmas, like all this stuff. So everything's happening. So we're sort of taking a turn at this point, and this week we're going to start talking about things that we can make for gifts and things that will be more for the holiday season. So I'm excited about that. We decided to go back and redo one of our most popular tutorials. So it is the It is the self-binding blanket, and it's one of our most popular on YouTube as well as just in general. People love this blanket. We teach the class all the time, and it's great. So we're going to do that one today, and I'm Teresa Coates, National Educator. I'm here with Hawk. He's my little cameraman. Thanks so much, Hawk. Appreciate you. And Ellen and Michael are out there. We'll answer questions for you, and you can pass them along. So if you have any questions, please put them in the comments. We will give away a kit to make a blanket, so I will talk to you about which fabrics you want to get, but we will give away a kit to make a blanket, and you'll be able to make a self-binding blanket as well. So if you want to win, we need you to share the video with your sewing friends and share them what to do. So this is what we're talking about, is this cute little self-binding blanket. So this one I made, a lot of times you'll see the self-binding blankets are square, and the one that we'll make today is a square, but I wanted to make a rectangle for this one just to show you guys how it works, okay? And that you can totally do this as a rectangle. Doesn't have to be a square. So that's the first thing to know. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of things that you can vary with this project because it is so flexible and you can do tons of different things with it. So we're going to talk about that, but first we're going to make the blanket. So let's get started. Okay, put this to the side. So we decided, Hawk and I were talking last night, trying to figure out like which fabrics do we use for the blanket. We're going to use the big one tomorrow because we're going to be back tomorrow, and I'm going to redo this project. Let me show you the fabrics I'm going to do for that. So they are still in the plastic bag because, you know, it was exciting and I left them there so it would be more like Christmas when I open this. Okay, so this is the fabric that we used for the front, and this is what I'm going to use for the big guy tomorrow. Okay, so I'm going to do this 50 by 60 tomorrow. So if you're interested in having a large one, come back for that. Okay, today we're going to do a smaller one and some variations. If I can get this fabric out. There we go. This is the Glacier, and I really love this one. So we're going to be using these two. These are basically the same color. This is the Oxford, and this is Glacier. Okay. The reason I'm going to do them differently, we'll talk a little bit more, is how this one has a directional design in it, and this one doesn't. So you'll be able to see them, how they work differently with basically the same color. Okay. And these are both the basil color, which is a new color that we just came out with in the last few months, is this basil, and I really like this a lot. So this is tomorrow's big blanket. Okay. So come back then. Putting that to the side. But today, we decided we needed to do a different one. And we realized we haven't done a lot of prints or anything that were more masculine. So we're going that direction today. So we're going to do the motorcycles print, which, if we're going to be honest, I'm the one who's more into motorcycles in this relationship. But,
That's true.
but more typically, this is something that guys are going to be into. So it works really well that way. And then we're going to use the black hide. So this is a super nice, you can see how shiny and yummy that is. It's super glossy. Is that the right word for it? Yeah, it's very pretty. So we're going to use this for the back and this for the front. Okay, we're going to make a smaller one today just so we can work through the different bits. And like I said, bigger tomorrow. The first thing we're going to do is cut out the fabric. So what we need to do is decide how big we want this blanket. All right, that's your first step. In the pattern that you can download, so if you go to the blog, you can find more information and you can find the pattern and you can download it. There's a couple of different sizes. So there's one you can make, I think it's an 18-inch blanket, and one that you can make a 36, no, maybe it is 36-inch blanket. Now I can't remember, sorry. You get to decide whatever size you want to make it. So this one today, I'm going to make, let me think. If I want to use my ruler, it's an 18-inch ruler. So let's do a 19-inch blanket, okay? So what I want to do is I'm going to figure out let's go for 20. It's easier to remember and add to, okay? So if we have a 20-inch blanket, that's what we want our finish to be, then I have to figure out how big of borders I want. So let's say for this one, and I'll show you some different size borders, but for this one, let's say we want a 2-inch border. So I want a 20-inch square plus 2 inches borders on either side. So it means I need a 24-inch square. Okay, does that make sense? That's how we figure out that math. If you want to do it rectangular, it's probably easier to write the information down and then do your math from there. I'm not a good math person, but you would do the same thing, is figure out the width plus the border and the height plus the border. Okay, so you can do that any size you want, and the larger ones really do better with a larger border, and smaller ones do better with a smaller border, so you can kind of figure that out as to what you want. Like I said, I'll show you some examples in a bit, and you can see, and you can kind of get an idea on what you like. So let's say we're going to do 20-inch blanket, so we need a 24-inch square to be our backing fabric. The way I like to do this is I just start with the back, and I don't cut the front yet. Okay, and I'm going to call it the front or the center, and that'll be the print that we're going to use in the front of the blanket. Okay, so this is, I think, 2 yards. I didn't cut this last night because I wanted to kind of show you how I deal with this, and we'll talk about it a little bit more tomorrow when we're doing a large blanket. This is something we've dealt with in classes. When you have a lot of fabric, it's a lot of fabric, and if I let this hang off the side of my table, it's just going to keep falling. I'm just going to fight it the whole time, which is super frustrating. And I'm sure if you have worked with it at all, that has happened to you at some point where it just keeps falling and it's annoying, and then it makes the sewing a lot less fun. So what I want to show you is how I deal with it. And really what I have to do is clear as much space as I can, which is not a ton up here. And I'm going to mark myself a square on here. One of the things that people tend to do, because this blanket is a really popular one to make, is that at this point, they're going to lay their fabric out, and then they're going to lay their ruler on there and start cutting. Okay, so they lay it on here, they start cutting and try to cut that 24-inch square. Well, if you've ever done that before, you know that this thing likes to move. And so by the time you've got your 24-inch square cut out, it's actually more like a 23 by 22 by 24 by 26 piece. It'll just be funky. And that's generally what happens. Then people try to recut it and get a square, and then they cut again, and then they cut again, and they get really frustrated because things keep wiggling. So the thing that I recommend is that you start by marking it, and then we're going to cut it. So I've got my silver Sharpie, because that's what we're going to use to mark on the back of the dark fabric. It's just a silver Sharpie. Okay, these work really well. And I'm going to use my big, huge ruler to help me get squares. So you may not have one that's quite this big. It's clearly marked from another project. Do you remember how we used this tape before? This was, yeah, this is from a quilt that I just recently did. Okay, so I don't need those markings on there. So I'm going to get rid of that tape. But now I've got my big ruler, so I can use this to get my square going. So that's what I'm going to do, because what I want to do is make sure that this is actually going to be the right size. Okay, I just realized too, I might be able to, I said 24-inch square, right, Hawk?
You did.
Okay, so I just realized, I'm going to draw this square here. My square ruler here is 18 inches square. Okay, so if I add my 6-inch ruler, I get 24, right?
Indeed.
Oh, good. Okay, my math is right. Sometimes I worry about myself because my math is not always correct. Okay, so here I can add my ruler to it. I've got the 18 inches over, add my 16 inches, or my 6 inches, sorry, and then I'm going to get to 24. Okay, so now I've got there. So then what I'm going to do is I need to move this because I can't actually access here because of the way my table is. So I have to move this. So this is where things get wonky. Is because if I move this, things are going to shift and do things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this forward just a little. Okay. I'm going to fold this up and I'm going to drag the whole thing backward using the ruler to hold the weight. Okay. So that's going to help it come back a little bit more evenly. Oop, there goes some off the end. Okay. And I'm going to move things around as little as possible. So this is really the trick, is trying to get it to not really move. Okay, because the more it moves, the more that knit is going to shift on us. And we don't want that to happen. Okay, so I'm going to look here. I've got my edge. I can come all the way down here. It'll match up to where I was before. So I'm going to draw that line in there. Okay, then I can also come over here and I can see my 18-inch stops here, my 24-inch here. I think that's going to work out just fine. So I'm going to draw my line. Oops. I got piles under there somewhere. Okay. All right. So then I need to push this up and mark over here. Okay. So the easiest thing would be for me to come around the other side of the table, but I'm going to stay on this side and just do the reach. But when you're doing these, make sure that you are not moving the fabric any more than you have to move it. Okay, so I'm going to move myself and move the rulers and move other things to try to get to the right position so that I can draw my square without actually shifting the fabric. Because every time you move the fabric, it gets off square. Okay, so you could see this way was pretty easy for me to measure the 18 plus the 6, and I got to the 24, which was great spontaneous, like mathematic wonder there. That was great. But if we're doing, so tomorrow when we do a larger one, and if you're doing a bigger one, or if you don't have an 18-inch ruler, you're going to have to try to measure across. So what I would suggest that you do at that point, so we're going to pretend that I don't have this fancy ruler. We're just going to have the 6 by 24, okay? So I'm going to draw my line here, and then I'm going to measure here, and I'm going to draw a little line, and I'm going to come here and draw a little line, and then I'll make them match, okay? Then I would draw that line together. So hopefully that makes sense. That it's really important to measure all of that and get it in the right position before we start to cut it, because now I can actually move this all around, and it's going to be no big deal if it's not in the exact straight, because I know where to draw. So even though this is off now, I can actually cut, or I know where to cut it. So now I can just cut it right along that line and I'll be totally fine. Okay. All right. We're doing all right out there?
Yeah.
Okay. Good, good. All right. So I've got my little blade. I think I might have to pop this off soon. Get a fresh one. So this is my Olfa SAC-1 blade. It's the one I like the best. And pretty cute little thing. So it has a nice little point, and we're going to use that to cut it. I am using this one because instead of my rotary, because I don't want to make so much mess, and really that's why. Yeah, because I don't want to make a mess. Okay. Yep, I need to pop that off. Okay. I feel like I do this like every 2 little episodes here. There we go. Brink. I have a little pile of blades in there. Okay, so we'll start again. There, so much better. Okay, and I'm just going to drag it right along the back of the fabric here, trying not to cut too much of the front. So I'm not pushing super hard because my blade is really sharp. So if I push too hard through, I have more chance of cutting those front fibers. I'm trying to avoid that. You can cut it with a rotary cutter. It would just make a sharper edge. And this is one of those projects that it actually makes a difference in the final look of it, whether you've cut it with a rotary or not, because all 4 of those borders end with a raw edge. Okay, so I'm going to cut it all the way to the edge, because I don't want all of that to come off. So you can see that's the mess that I made. Okay, it did cut through some of it because my blade is brand new. So I'm just going to vacuum before I move. Hold up. Okay, And we're just going to do this all the way around. Vacuum, vacuum. I'm going to cut this one over here next because there's a whole lot of weight here coming off the table. So what I want to do is I want to bring this up onto the table, because as I start to cut this and it starts to fall this way, it'll start to pull it more. Okay, and we don't want that to happen. So I'm just going to move it, get it shifted, and drag this right along here. Get that separated. And you can see the difference. You'll be able to tell really well here today, because we're doing a square, that it will cut differently depending on which way the fabric is going. So this is the stretch, this is not. The lengthwise had more of the nap falling off. This one has less. So it's interesting, things like that. There's little variances in how the fabric is made and how it will shed. Oops, I didn't make my mark all the way down. I gotta go back and do that. Okay. So I'm going to, I had a little one, there it is. Here's my little ruler. So what I'm gonna do here, because I wanna make sure that this is square still. Okay, so I'm gonna line it up on the line that I drew and along that cut edge. That means I have to find my silver Sharpie again. Who knows what I did with it? Oh no, oh no. There it is. There's so much fabric up here, it just gets lost. Okay, there we go. All right, so now it's matching up to here. So I don't know if you can see the actual cut edge back there. So this is just the fibers coming out, but I could see the backing here, and then I lined it up with my edge there. So now I'm in the right position and I can keep cutting. And the biggest trick with using these blades is that they, you can't hold them up too high, and that you have to hold pressure on them. So this is really important to hold this pressure over here. Otherwise it just wants to drag. Okay, so you have to keep the hand back here to actually cut through the fabric, the backing fabric. Okay, but it does work really well. You can see, not too big of a mess. We'll vacuum when I'm done. And get all the way around. So I'm going to cut this out, and then we're going to sew it up, and then we'll cut the other. So what I do, this is my own personal way of doing this, just so I can get the measures right. What I have found is that when I'm cutting out like a 40-inch square, it's a little bit harder, or maybe what I should say, it's a little easier to mess up those measurements. So I tend to make the cuts first and then do the middle, because I've definitely cut the middle before and then cut it the wrong size. So I'm trying to avoid errors.
Somebody wants to know, how many grids do you have?
How many?
And that is a crazy question to answer, because you haven't even begun to see how many grids.
Yeah, I have, like the number of rulers, even just the 6x12, I probably have 8 of them. Yeah. I mean, really, because you guys see, if you're here more than once, this is not your first cut, you see that I'm like, where did that go? What did I do with it? Yeah. It's kind of how I work. Okay.
Something about forests and trees.
Yeah. Something about not seeing the forest for the trees.
Yes.
Yeah. I like to blame the concussion for my lack of memory where things are, but really I think it's just because I'm forgetful. It happens. And I get excited and I'm in the middle of a project, and then I like move things and I forget where I put them. Okay, so I'm going to take this and give it a good shake. If you have a home with a dryer, go put this in the dryer just for a few minutes and let it get that dust off of it. Because I don't, we're just going to shake it. So I vacuumed up most of the mess. Then I give it a little shake. I'll vacuum up my floor later. All right, so now I've got my square. You can see here's my big square. Now I've got a square. All right, so I have to take that little bit of extra time to measure out the square, but then it is just a square, which is great because probably one of the bigger concerns that I've heard from people when we're making this in class is that they get really frustrated by that cutting part of it. So make sure that you're laying it out nice and flat, measure it carefully, then cut it, okay? Right, so now we've got our square, and I decided I wanted 2-inch borders, so we're going to make 2-inch borders on here. I'm going to show you the way that I do it, and then later I'll show you a little secret if you're going to make a bunch of these. So I've got my ruler, I've got silver marker all over it, and I'm just going to measure over 2 inches, and I'm going to line, so this is my 2-inch mark, and I'm going to line that up with my cut edge, and then I'm going to mark it. Okay, and I'm going to mark it so that it doesn't quite go up to the top and that I've got, what is that, about 8 inches? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to put this on here so that it matches my backing edge at 2 inches, and then I mark it so it doesn't quite go to the edge. I don't mark it all the way across, but I do mark a decent hunk, so usually 6 to 8 inches is what I'll mark. So now I've got this, so now I can mark my 45-inch, or my 45-degree mark across here. That's going to be my sewing line. This is important. So now I've got this mark on my ruler, and all rulers are a little bit different in this. Let me see what my, if this one has it. So this is a different one. So this is a Creative Grid, and here's my 45, and I got a 45 and a 45. I've got a few of them. This one I've got a 45 that's over here. Okay, so one that has more 45 lines on it is better, because then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the line that's on here that says it's the 45-degree mark, and I'm going to line it up on the one I just drew here. Okay, so I just put it right on top of it so that it intersects where the two lines come together. Okay, so kind of what I'm doing is I'm putting this on here because I know that this part is going to come off because I'm making a mitered corner. So I really just have to find the right place for that to go, and then I kind of shift it. So I always put my ruler on in this position and then find the right placement for it. So now I'm going to draw that line. I want it to go right through that. And that one I'm going to draw edge to edge because this is my stitching line. So I want to make sure that that's the one I sew on. So it'll go to the edge where I'm going to sew. All right, so let's do that 3 more times. Okay, it'll start to make sense. When we do this in class, people struggle sometimes with this ruler part, and I always tell them by the 4th corner they'll have it. Then you'll be done. So you have to go home and make another one because you will have forgotten. Okay, so again, 2 inches, 2 inches. I will tell you to make sure that when you are using Creative Grids and some of the other rulers, they have this extra half. So that can be a little bit confusing. So this is a 6.5-inch ruler. So if you do it from the wrong side, you can get the measurements wrong. So be careful. Okay, so now I'm going to lay this on here. Do the same thing again. Line it up. And draw my line. All right. And again. So I'm going to use my 2 inches. Line it up. And I can kind of use the line that I drew when I originally made the square to line my ruler up on so I can see where that cut edge is pretty well. Okay, make it so it doesn't quite hit the edge. And I'm going to put it on, move it around, and I'm always going to get a triangle over here. Okay.
We have an interesting question. Do any of these, especially the dark colors, need to be pre-washed before we start?
The polyester is pretty darn color fast, and so black especially, I've never had any issues with it. If you are worried, you could definitely pre-wash it and it wouldn't cause any issues with it. Red, we generally, if you're going to combine it with white, we recommend that you pre-wash it. And that's because red is just not a very stable color in general, not just in fabrics, but in paint and all sorts of stuff. Red tends to not hold on.
Can right? Confirm.
Yes, thank you. So as the painter, you can confirm that red is just not a stable color. So that one we recommend that you pre-wash that one. If you're going to use a big hunk of it and you think it's something that's going to get washed a lot. Also, you can use color catchers. I've never had anything that has faded like that or bled onto something else, but it definitely, I've heard stories that it could happen. Same with lots of other things in this industry. I haven't experienced it, but I've heard it can happen. Okay, so now all of my corners should look like this. All right, so they're going to look like this, and then I'm going to fold them, and I'm going to make the mitered corners. So this one is a little bit different than some of the other tutorials that you might have seen where they sew the two pieces together, flip it, and then you have the miter. We're actually going to make the mitered frame first. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn these. Okay, so I want to do this so you guys can see really well. So I've got my corner marked. I always want to fold it so that my dog ear comes out that direction. Okay, and that my raw edges are up here, my fold is here. Now I can be careful and I can do the little quilter trick where I pin through here, I try to stab through the other side. Pretty good. Okay. It isn't super duper important that those match up, but it's nice if they do. I will sometimes do this pin and sometimes I don't. I did it this time just so I can show you. You will want to do this if you are using a Cuttle 3. All right, because we want those edges to match really well. And but on the regular Luxe Cuttle, it's not quite as important if it's not perfect. But as you're learning, this is a good tool to keep that nice and even. Okay, so here's my stitching line. I'm going to come down. My little intersection is all at the fold. It's going to come back up. So those two should match pretty well when I'm sewing it. Okay, so let's do it again. We got it at a corner. We're going to fold it. I'm going to make sure that comes out to a point. Get those to match pretty well. And then I'm just going to pin it in place. Okay, we're going to pin it, as you can see, on either side of my stitching line. And the reason that I do that is because when we sew this, now I don't have to take any pins out. It can just stay right there, and it's going to stay in the position I want it to stay in, which is great. Okay, and again. Okay, and I can just kind of visually see, make sure that that's right. Okay, because it's going out to a point. My little lines are matching. My intersections at the fold. Okay, and then I'm just going to pin it. If you're doing a larger one, if your border is bigger, this will get longer and you might want to do 2 pins on this side. Okay, I'm going to move this pin just slightly because I want it to hold a little better. Okay, and if you're worried about your tops matching, like on that other one, you can totally stick a pin in here. You'll just want to take that pin out before you start sewing. The others we can sew through. All right, last corner. Fold it, dog ear, raw edges up, fold at the bottom, making sure those match. And I'm just going to pinch it real hard is all I do. And then pin it in place. So if you, like, I'm holding this out at the bottom to kind of keep it in position. And then I pin it. Okay, and then I sort of reposition just a little, just finagle with it, make sure it's right. And then I can check, make sure that that seems to work. Okay, so here I can stick my pin through. It matched. Okay, so I know I can sew on that and it'll be just fine. If your 45-degree miter isn't perfect, one of the great things about Cuttle, it's fine. It'll work out. You do want to make sure that it's, you know, pretty darn close though. One of the things you want to make sure of that people do mess up is this line is not your sewing line. Okay, whoopsie. This line here is just your guide to try to find your 45. So if you sew on this, don't take it out, okay? Just leave it there and re-sew that line. But this is the line we're sewing on, and that's why I draw this one to the edge, because visually it's just a reminder for me that this is the sewing line. That is not, okay? All right, let's come on over. Look at that, we're already sewing. Wham, bam. Okay, it's so fast today. All my stuff, all my rulers. All right, let's, and no shoes again today. All right, I don't want to break this guy, so I'm going to move it. Those guys are expensive. They're well worth it. So if you don't have a big square ruler and you do any sort of quilting or anything where you might need to square things up, I totally recommend it. It's well worth the investment. Okay, I'm going to start with one that has a pin across the top. All right, I'm going to switch this over here to a straight stitch. I'm going to bring my stitch up to a 3. I'm only sewing 2 layers of Cuttle, so it should sew it through just fine. If I feel like it's not going through as well, I'll switch that up to a 3.5, but it should be okay.
Talk about needles and stuff.
Okay. My needle is 90/14 stretch needle because we always sew with a 90/14 stretch needle when we're working with Cuttle. And I think I've got Mettler in there. Yep. I've got some Mettler black thread. So we're actually going to use black thread today because I wanted it to show you how well it could hide it. We normally use gray thread for everything, and this one I actually am using black. So I've got my foot down. I took my pin out, so I got my foot in, and I'm going to back stitch a few so that I can get off the edge, and then I'm going to come forward. So I do not want to start before the edge. I always want to start under, like have the fabric completely under the foot first, and then I'm going to back stitch here. So we do want to back stitch beginning and end on this because this is one that will actually get some stress. Okay, so I'll cut these tails off later, but this goes all the way to the edge, catches, comes over here, double back tacks here, and I've left my pins in. Okay, and I'm just going to leave all the pins in until I get them all finished. So this is kind of a fun one because we can actually just sort of chain sew these. Okay, so I'm going to get that nice and even. Stick my foot under, do a few stitches, and then go forward. Okay, we're going to try to stitch as straight as possible. If it gets a little crooked, nobody will notice. Okay. So there's 1, 2, 3.
There's a little kerfluffle about the fact that you're using a matching thread today.
I know, it's crazy, right? Every once in a while I like to, you know, mix things up. Don't let you get too sure of yourself.
Can you start from the folded edge?
Oh, yes, that's a good question. No. Yes, you can start from the folded edge. Let me tell you why I always start from the raw edge. Because if this machine sews beautifully, I have a Baby Lock Crescendo that I sew on, and it sews with Cuddle wonderfully. And it doesn't seem to push forward very much. But a lot of times, even if you pin well, the fabric up here will shove a little bit. Okay? So what happens is if I start here and I sew this direction, and it starts to shove, all of that comes, and this gets longer off the end here, and those corners don't match. So what I want to do is make sure that these match, because this is going to be the inside corner of the front of my blanket. So this is totally going to show, and I don't want that to be off. It looks, I have an example somewhere, I should have found it. It'll make a little hiccup at your corner, and you don't want that. Okay, so we always start at the raw edge, go toward the fold. That way if there's any extra, it just goes into the fold and nobody will ever see it. Okay, much easier to hide back there. And if you've watched very much, you know, like one of the things that I love about Cuddle is that it really just hides all your mistakes, all your goofs. Okay, so back stitch.
Makes the world a softer, more forgiving place.
Yes, exactly. All right, so now I'm going to take my pins. I took a couple of them out because those were my beginning ones, the ones that I had stitched across the top. And I'm going to trim my thread. So I'm not usually a trimmer, but this one will actually, these will show up in the front of the quilt. So I want to trim them before that happens. So I'm going to take my pins out, trim my threads. Take my pins out, trim my threads. Okay, we'll do this to all 4 corners. So this is definitely one where I do kind of batch sewing, I guess you call it. So I've got all of my corners here. At this point, I just need to whack all of these off. So you can use a rotary cutter or your scissors. I'm just going to use my big scissors so I can get them off in one fell swoop. Okay, I recommend that you do it over the trash because you'll see this will make a mess. I'm going to do all 4, and you can see I'm just going to whack them off. I don't really care how big they are. It's all going to hide underneath, so it'll be fine. What I have found is that somewhere around the 3/8 mark is really kind of the best. You can see I'm measuring very, very carefully today. So somewhere around 3/8 is great. And what that does is it gives it enough room to sort of lay down, which is great. What I have found is that if you cut this really small, because it's a knit, it'll tend to roll, and then you can see it, or you can feel it underneath it, which is frustrating. So here, these will actually lay out nice and flat and hide underneath there. We don't need to trim this. If this were cotton, we would need to trim that little corner. We don't. So once we have those trimmed, then we're fine. I'm going to vacuum that up because I chose one of the really messy fabrics today. Okay, so there we go. That'll take care of it well enough for now. All right, and now I can turn all of these inside out. So I'm just going to flip these and push them out. And all of a sudden, we have a little frame. Okay, so these, they just, when I push them, I kind of open them up a little, and you don't really have to work very hard at all because they kind of want to open up as it is. So I just hold my finger on there and give it a little twist and push that out. Okay, if you have a point turner, you could use that. See if my scissors are too sharp there. They're okay. Okay, do as I say, not as I do. Don't use scissors as a point turner. But what I have found is you don't want to use the stiletto as a point turner for this because it definitely pokes holes in it. And it won't really hurt it, but I don't like stabbing the stiletto through it. It makes me sad. You'll also notice that all of our fibers are stuck in those seams. And we can just kind of come back over that and fluff those guys up. Okay, and then all of a sudden your seam is basically disappeared. So if you didn't get that totally straight, doesn't matter because now it's gone. Okay, so we just fluff that up in there, just drag it along the seam, and it pulls out all of the little fibers that are stuck in there. Okay, so let me do all four corners. I like to just get them over with, one bit at a time. That fluffing like really makes a big difference. One place you'll find it is just right here at the tip. There'll definitely be more of it because it's all coming in together. These aren't doing, oops, sorry. These aren't doing too bad. And you can see how the fibers laid differently. Okay, so this is where that little corner is that I was saying we need to get that nice and square right here because this corner will show. So because of the fluff, that corner kind of hides in there. So we're okay. And even if we get it a little bit off, it's going to be all right. If this were a C3, this would be extra important because that would totally show from the front. Okay. So now we've got the frame. All right, so now you can head around to the other side. I'm going to do a whole bunch of cutting and pinning. Okay, so this is the part that makes this project really kind of so much more versatile. I need to find a better place for this big square one. I'm going to stick it at the end, Hawk, so I don't hit it, okay?
Okay.
So try not to trip over it. I'll need it again in a minute. Okay, so I've got my frame. That's what I like to call this. So if I lay this out, you can see how this creates a little frame. All right. At this point, I can put anything inside of here, and I'll show you some examples in a little bit, but that's what makes this project extra fun. So now this is extra versatile because we've made it with the cuddle. We're just going to use raw edges here to tack it down, and anything can go in the front. We're going to use this motorcycle fabric that I have right there. But the first thing I want to do is I want to measure the width of my blanket, okay? And I'm going to measure it both directions and make sure that I did it close to right. Okay, oh, look at that. It's 20 inches. Okay, so we said my blanket would be 20 inches with 2-inch borders. So that's what we got. So this way is 20 inches, and I'm going to turn this and measure it the other way. This is where, I think I told you, sometimes I don't measure quite as correctly. And it's been that one will be 20 and one will be, you know, 21. See? Ta-da! It happens all the time. This is what happens to me. Yeah, not even kidding. It was supposed to be 20. Yeah. It happens to me all the time. How did that happen? I don't know. I measured at 18 and the ruler both times. I don't know. You saw me. I'll watch it again and be like, how did I do that?
You scooted it up.
Yeah, I must have scooted it enough that I didn't see the inch difference. I didn't get it lined back up. Yep. And so that's what happened. So this exactly, see, this is why we do these, guys. It's because this happens. So I was like, when I hung it up, I was like, that doesn't look quite square. But this makes it, so now I can totally make the inside so it just fits this piece. I don't have to worry about like, oh no, my piece is too small and how do I make it fit in there? Doesn't matter. I'm just going to make it fit because I know what size it's supposed to be now. Okay, so I've got 20 by 21. Let's make sure that that side is actually the same. Yes, it is. Okay, so 20 by 21 is what my blanket is going to be. Now, pretty funny, huh? I need to figure out which way my nap is. This is the hide so I can see which way the fabric is going. If I pet it this way, it feels nicer. It's still got some little ruffly bits in here, but I can feel that this is the way the nap goes. So I want it to go this way. So I'm going to measure this again, make sure. So this is my 20-inch is down and 21-inch is wide. Okay. So because Teresa can't remember things, she's going to write it down. So 20 inches down and 21 this way. Right?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Whew. Concussion, yeah. Whoops. All right, so now I've got my little frame, and I'm just going to put it to the side because now I have to cut the middle. So once I have the outside sizes, then what I have to do is make the inside, and I'm going to make that 1 inch smaller. So instead of 20 by 21, I'm going to make it 19 by 20. Okay. I'm so glad you guys get to come along and see my funny little mistakes. I did it once and I accidentally cut it like 2 inches because I was making a very large one and I made it 2 inches different, and then I couldn't fit the middle part underneath and I'd already cut it. That was when I was like, I'm not doing it that way anymore. Nope. Because it was a total waste of my inside fabric. It was terrible. Okay. So let me get my big ruler here. Okay. So 20 down. I'm going to sneeze. I can feel it. So if I sneeze, sorry guys. Okay. So mark across and down. Okay. So this one I need to add 2 inches. And this one I need to add 3 inches. Okay. So I'm going to do that. I'm also...
Oh, I see what you did. There we go.
I wrote on it because I can. Okay, so I'm marking where my edge is. I'm also going to mark it down here. Now, this is white fabric, but it shouldn't show through the other side, but I can still see that there's like a motorcycle on the other side there. So I'm going to do my little mark right underneath, just in case. Okay, because I don't like to flaunt the rules too terribly much. Okay, maybe a little. All right, so now I can use my other ruler. I'm going to use those lines that I drew, draw this forward just a little bit, and I'm going to put my lines on here. Okay, there it is. Okay, so what I'm lining up here is this 2 inches is past the mark that I made here and past the mark that I made here. So you can see those. Okay, got my fabric nice and flat. I'm just going to push this up. So it's 2 inches there, 2 inches there, and I'm going to move this over so that my line is on it so I can see like, yes, yes, that's actually straight. Okay, it's continuing up from where I wanted it to be. Okay, so you can see I do the same thing with the middle, even though this isn't quite as fluffy and crazy as the outside fabric. I'm still going to mark it and then cut it. Okay, see if we can get this right. All right, and this one, I'm going to mark on there. I need to do it 3 inches. So this is something that I do is I kind of use my ruler to get it nice and flat. And this is another place. So this is, my ruler is 3.5 inches. So if I measure it from here, I'm going to get 3.5 inches. I'm going to measure it this way and put my little half line on here and here. Get those lines to come up. Okay. Okay. Good enough. Okay, so now, oh, then I need to finish drawing my line that I didn't do before. The common mistakes that I make. I often do this. Okay, so this is a place that you can start to see if you look at this, like this is where if I lay this down and I get this to line up here, that it doesn't line up here. Do you see that? And it's because the fabric just shifted. So this is where when you're trying to draw those lines, and if you're just using the ruler, like you think that it's straight, totally looks like it's straight, and then you cut it and you've cut off 1 inch of that corner because the fabric shifted. And that's all it is I can absolutely shift it again and be like, oh, look, there it is, perfectly straight. And we know it's straight because I laid the whole ruler on there. at one whack. So like the 18-inch ruler made sure that that corner was nice and square, but it still starts to get weird. So this is why I definitely recommend that you mark it all out first. It'll be just less mistakes. Okay? Not no mistakes, clearly. All right, so then I'm just going to cut this out. This is a digital cuttle, and so it's really thin. I'm going to cut it with the rotary cutter because it's no biggie. Okay, you could also cut it with scissors if you wanted to, but there's no reason for me to cut it with the blade. That's just a little bit extra work.
And again, this is 1 inch smaller than
the frame.
The frame.
Right, so that's what it should be at least. Okay, so we'll lay these out and we'll see again. Okay, so I make the frame, I measure it, and then I take 1 inch off of each side. Because what I'm doing, I'll show you in just a second, is making it slightly smaller than the frame so it can kind of shift around in there and I don't have to get it perfect. Okay. Oh, Ellen asked me something. Is the inside 1 inch smaller? Yes. Okay. Yes. So we should have it now. Okay. How did it end up basically the same size? Did you see me measure, Hawk? What did I measure wrong? I don't know either. Okay, I'm going to check it again. I might have measured it 20 by 20. I might not have taken off the inch. People are like, seriously, Teresa, get it together. Yeah, that's what I did. See? But this is, yeah. But this is honestly why I do it this way, because it's so easy to start getting it like not quite perfect. And if you cut it too big, that's fine. Like honestly, I'm just going to whack it off. Okay. So that's the 1 inch that way. So let's go this direction. That's 20 inches. This is 20 inches. So one needed to be 19. Which one was it? Where's my paper again? Oh no. So we're going to lay this out. I'm going to show you just exactly how I do this every time. This is how I do it, guys. Okay.
All right, let's catch back up on the nap right now since it's square, right?
It is a square. Yep.
Accidentally.
Accidentally a square. Yep. Okay. So it's smoother this direction than it is this. Then if I do it this way, it's sort of not quite as good. And it doesn't really matter. Like height is weird like that. That it actually like feels fairly good both ways. One way usually feels better. So this is top to bottom. Okay. So I just happen to lay it down right. So this way, I've got it. So this way, if I get it up to the corner, you can see that this is where I've got the 1 inch cut off. I'm going to cut off 1 inch over here. Okay, normally I tell you don't use your board as a measuring device. But this one, because that 1 inch is just kind of like it's fine if it's not exactly 1 inch. Then it's all right. Okay. A lot of times people want to cut them the exact same size. So if it's a 20 by 21, they want to cut the 20 by 21. What I have found is that that makes it so that this has to fit underneath there perfectly, and I don't like that. Okay. So this is how I can tell if it's going to work or not, because it's going to fit inside of this. Okay. Does that make sense? Sort of. Okay. So we figured out the outside 20 by 21, and then I figured out the inside 19 by 20. Okay, so that's how that that's how that works. Like I said, this is exactly why I do it the way that I do, because it's easy to get the measurements off. At least for me it is. So I always fix it. So now at this point, I just need to tuck this underneath, and that's all I'm going to do, is just tuck it right under all of those edges. Okay. So it will fit under here. So you can see if it's under here, here's my line. and I've got about a 1/2 inch here that it's got a little bit of leeway. Because this is 2 inches, it's going to overlap 1.5 inches. I want it to be fairly close to here. I don't want it to be a big difference. Like I don't want it to stop over here. I really want it to come closer to the edge like this. You can see over here is the same way. Okay, this is about how we want it to fit. So this is the fold line that we're going to use. One of the things that I realized is you can kind of give it a little tug and it'll mostly be straight there. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. Just tug it all the way around. Get it as nice and flat as possible. So one of the things that happens is that these edges like to smile sometimes. So this is a place to be careful. So if I measure up here, I broke it into the ruler. Okay. Then I've got just about 2 inches, which is what we wanted. Okay, that's where we marked the line. You can see my fuzz, but I can feel the fold is right here. Okay. So then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do the same thing. And I want that fold, which I can feel, is just at the 2 inch mark. Okay, so I'm going to pin this here. Because now I know this is 2 inches from that edge. I know that this is 2 inches from the edge. So I'm going to pin it here.
So we're not using any batting in this project at all?
No batting.
No batting.
No, you can, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try to pin this and not move it, because that's when things start to shift and get funky, and we don't want that. So I'm going to do the same thing here, and I'm going to measure and try to get 2 inches. Pull it back just the tiniest bit. So what I have found is it likes to crawl to the inside. Okay, so that smile will happen this direction, obviously not that large, but it will smile inward. Okay, and on the smaller ones, you won't notice quite as much, and on the big ones, it can be kind of an issue.
And tomorrow we're going to do we're going to use these same basic techniques only on a big blanket?
Yes, and a little bit differently, because then we do actually do some spray basting, and there's some more checking and pinning and all sorts of stuff that have to happen to get it right. Okay, so we're going to do a big one tomorrow to show you that. Okay, so I like to get the corners all pinned, especially if I'm using, like for this one, I can fit the whole thing out on here, which is great. So if you're learning this technique, I definitely recommend that you start with a size that's smaller like this. Just pick a size, any size, and make it. And an easy one to start with is a 20 by 17, and then you make 1 inch borders. Like 28 square outside, 17 square inside. Yeah, and then an inch borders. Okay, that's a nice size, because this whole thing I can lay out, so I don't have to move it around and get it to, like, I don't know, shift too much, because I'm not having to move it. If I were working with a piece that were like 45 inches, I can't get that on my board, so I have to shift it around. That's when I have more issues. So make sure that you get your corners done. Okay, so we're going to come over here and check this one again and make sure that we got the 2 inches. Okay, and that's to prevent this from bowing up. Here, I'll show you. What tends to happen is they tend to do this. Okay, so can you see this curve here?
Yep.
Sometimes it's really, really obvious, and sometimes it's not. And sometimes you're so worried about getting it carefully pinned that you don't notice that there's this smile, that it's doing this. Because if I look up here, I can actually make this.
Over your shoulder.
Sure.
For me, it was a frown.
Right, right. And for me, it's a smile. We just call it a smile no matter which way it goes. But like if you come over the top, this line, I can get it to come along this and be straight. But this is actually still crooked. So this is why we have to just be extra careful. And I'm going to give this a little tug, and it'll mostly go back into position. So on these smaller ones, we can do that. We can tug it, make sure that it's right. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to measure it from the cut edge over to the fold. So I need to pull it just a little bit more, sort of feel it with my finger. There's the 2 inches. Okay, so now I'm going to pin that, make sure that that stays where I want it to be. So these middle sections are the corners, and the middle sections are the most important. Then in between that, we can keep going. When we're working with a larger one, we'll have to do a little bit more, because it has just a lot more flexibility to move around on us. Okay, so now I'm going to do some pinning. So this is a time that we are going to do a little bit of the double pinning. So not a crazy amount of double pinning, but a little bit. Okay, the newer you are to working with Cuddle, the more you need to do the pinning. As you get more used to working with the fabrics, it'll be a little bit easier. I'm gonna check this right here because it seems a little wide. Okay. So you can kind of just double check these, and it really is by touch. I wish you could feel, but like the edge of it is right here and over here. Ellen said people were asking what size we're gonna make tomorrow. 50 by 60 is what I'm planning, but it might be like 51 by 62. You know. Just saying.
Is there a cutoff for when you would consider it to be a large blanket, and then you might start using the large blanket techniques?
Like more like a throw?
Yeah.
It's really just personal preference. Honestly, this you would do a large one really because you want the border. That would be the specific reason to make it this way. I like the throw a lot, so when I make big blankets, that tends to be how I make them anyway. It's just like as the throw technique. But this one is really specifically so you can get this border on here. Okay, so you can't make it any bigger than, I don't know, upper 50s, just because the fabric is 60 wide. So at that point, then we have to have a border and all that sort of stuff, unless, you know, you're long, but we can only make it so wide. So when I say 50 by 60, it's not really going to be that because it's 60 wide. Yeah.
Right.
Unless I do it the other direction. Oh, all the thoughts. Okay. Sorry. I have to do some planning tonight. But I'm going to try not to do any cutting, even though I want to get started on it. But I'm going to let us do that together. Okay, and we'll figure it out. So I'm just pinning a bunch of these. You can see I'm pinning along the edge. I'm doing right along the cut edge. You can also see how you can see the backing in some places. Okay, and then in other places, it totally comes over the edge. All right, so it comes over here, and then here's some backing. And that's because of the way that the fabric is designed, the way that the nap goes. Since when it goes down this way, it's going to expose the backing. When the nap comes up this way, it's going to hide it. All right, so that's just one of the, I don't know, side effects from using hide. So we'll talk a little bit more about that and what the different ones do and how they look. Okay, we'll talk about that when I'm done with this one, because I have a whole bunch of samples to show you guys and talk about other fabrics. Because this one we just want to talk about the how you put it together, and then I'll show you the way that it works with other ones. All right, and so every time I'm going to turn this, give it a little tug. You can spray base this in the middle, but you don't have to. So this one I didn't, and I'll show you one that I did. Doesn't make a ton of difference to me, but it might make it slightly easier for you to spray base that middle if it's giving you some hassle. Okay.
Sort of a general Cuddle Nikki question. Does Cuddle shed or fray?
It does when you cut it, and after that it won't. So after this, like we've got all of it out, I can totally pull this. So this is that edge that I cut. Okay, and I'm like scratching it with my nails, and you can see it's not coming off. So especially once I've washed this, that's not going to happen anymore. Once it's been used a little bit, it's not going to happen anymore. That's the difference between using our Minky, the Cuddle brand, versus other Minkies. So other Minkies tend to shed, and it's something that people get frustrated with, but ours do not. We work really, really hard to make the best Minky that's out there, and that's one of the things that we've been able to do is make it so it doesn't continue to shed. Yeah, it's a great question because it does. Other brands do. Yeah, for sure. It's something that I've definitely gotten to hear about. Okay, so now I'm just going to use a zigzag like we would if we were doing a binding on a quilt, because that's kind of what we're doing as a binding. So I'm going to start at a corner, and I'm just going to zigzag all the way around. I'm going to use a big wide zigzag, a 5 wide, 5 long, and I'm just going to come along here. I'm definitely putting on my reading glasses so I can see that edge. And then we're going to shoot for doing the best we can. When this edge is down here, you can barely see it in some places. Okay, so this wants to come over. I'm just going to have to kind of eyeball it and hope for the best. Okay, but what we want to do is catch this edge. So this is really important, is that we're catching this and we're holding it down. I'll show you some examples, but this is an important part, is we hold this down and we're catching just the edge of it. Okay. All right, so I'm going to put this under there. I'm going to get my machine changed so it's a wide zigzag. And I'm just going to feed it right along. So on my machine, I know that a 5 wide zigzag puts my zigzag just about here on my foot. So this is something to kind of figure out with your own machine as to where the lines correlate with stitches. Okay, so I'm going to put mine here so it'll come down just about there. All right. Now I'm going to take my pin out, do a little lock stitch, and then we're just going to go. And I'm going to use my stiletto to kind of hold this in place because what I want is to give it some tension. If you can kind of scan over here and you can see how it sort of like is a little bubbly. And it's going to happen while I'm sewing too. And you can see it here, like it wants to do that, but I can just tug it and it'll be nice. So we want to keep that tension as we're sewing. So I'm going to get to a point that I can actually grab it back here, and then I'll hold one hand in the back and one hand to keep it in check in the front. Okay. So at this point, I know my edge is here. There's my edge, and I'm aiming it toward that little red line. But as soon as I put this down, I can't see that edge anymore. Okay, so I really am just like kind of, I don't know, just hoping for the best. We'll see. My best isn't always perfect, but, you know, it is my best. So there we go. So there's my little line, and I'm just going to keep an eye on that as I go. And I'm going to keep a hand back here and a hand in the front. So I'm just keeping this so it's fairly straight. As I need to, if I'm having issues with it getting kind of, you know, bumpy or whatever, I can use my stiletto. I'm going to put it down for right this second. Because if I've double pinned, it's not going to be much of an issue. The bigger issue will be keeping this flat as it goes underneath the machine. Okay. But then I can use that every once in a while to sort of check, make sure, all right, that's aiming for it. This would be another situation where, let's see if we move. That's the outside, so you can sort of see this red line that comes up in here. I don't know if you guys can see that very well, just a little bit. Okay, so the red line catches the sparkle. I can see it, and that's where the edge of my zigzag is. Okay, so show over here on the screen, see if you guys can see that. So this little line here, that's where my laser is. So it's coming down just at the left side of my zigzag. That's where I want that stitch to come down.
And where was how to
this
move it
guy
left to right?
and this guy here.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I can see on here, and I can, you guys probably can't see, oh, you can see it on my finger right there. Okay, so I can see that here is my raw edge, and I can kind of just aim it for that and get it going in the right direction. Okay. So there it is, hitting my raw edge, move my pins, okay? And the key really is just to keep it right along that edge. This is something to practice a few times before you try to sew faster like I'm doing. So if you're sewing this for yourself, I want you to be sewing like this slow, trying to get the zigzag in the right place, okay? And I'm just gonna keep checking it, and there I can see that it's hitting the fabric in the right spot. Put my backing fabric down, and I'm still going to keep some tension as I'm coming toward this corner. Okay, and then as I come toward the corner, I'm going to try to find a place where I can stop, pivot, and go around. Okay, so now I've got all these pins left over here, and I'm just going to leave them because I don't need them yet. I'm going to take that corner one out before I start sewing and do the same thing. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put the fabric up here. So like we've talked about before, trying to keep your fabric off of the front of your machine. Try to get it up here. And even though this is small, if I have it here, I can feel it pulling this direction. And I don't want that. I don't want to fight the fabric. So I'm going to keep it up here, keep this little area tense as I sew. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing. Keep my eyeball on where it's going to go underneath the foot. That's going to get close. Take that pin out. Okay, do the same thing, kind of eyeball, so I can get this line to head toward there. And so when I'm sewing, I'm actually kind of looking here and making sure that that's going to go, because I know that that's where the zig is going to land. Is that it, or is that the zag on that side?
Oh, I think you were right the first time.
Okay.
I think that's the zig.
That's the zig. Okay,
yeah.
So the zig is going to land just off the edge. Okay, and you can see it's getting, you know, smushed up in there, and that's okay. We're going to come back over after this, as you guessed it, with the stiletto. We're going to make it all beautiful. The key really with this part is keeping this, because you can see how this wants to curl up or kind of, you know, pull up. And I just keep some tension on it. So I'm not pulling it. I'm just keeping tension to get it flat again, because that's what I want. Okay, same thing. Lift it, pivot it. All right, there we go. Okay, I'm like, oh, this is the area that we were at in August. Cheyenne. Yeah, Rapid City. So anybody's from, you know, is that North Dakota, right? Okay. So I'm just heading right along here. I'm going to make sure and take my pins out. So you can see I'm taking all the pins out on this side and leaving most of these pins. If they get in my way, I take them out. If they're not going to get in my way, I leave them. Because all it's going to do is hold the fabric from shifting over. This double pinning technique will help a lot if you have done this and it tends to shove forward on you. The double pinning, sewing slower, will help a lot. I'll also show you a couple of stitches that seem to make it work a little bit better if you're working with Cuddle 3. With the Luxe Cuddles, if it pushes a little bit, it ends up being that it doesn't matter too much because you won't really see it. But with the Cuddle 3, you really, really see it.
We were wrong. Rapid City's in South Dakota.
It's in South Dakota. I knew somebody would know.
Sorry.
I knew somebody would know. Sorry.
We just drove right through there, too.
We did.
I'm thinking about too many things at once.
But we were, like, heading toward Nebraska, so I don't know. Yeah, that was our little summer trip. Okay. All right, so same thing, and I can see my little red line. If you don't have the fancy little laser, which I know hardly any machines do, I can just pull this back, look at my raw edge, and then I just sort of eyeball it and aim for that. Okay? It doesn't matter if it's perfectly on that edge, but you don't want it to be far off the edge. Okay? What happens is that if you get it over here and you have the zigzag, this will curl up because it's a knit. And then you'll see that. You'll see the backing fabric. Interesting, on this side, I have a lot more of the exposed edge. I can see a lot more of it, which is easier to sew because I can see it, but also it will show a little bit more. So it's just the way that the nap is made. So it's interesting because I made a bunch of samples, and I've made this project in lots of fabrics. And they all behave slightly differently. So I'm going to aim for the corner again, where I've matched up my, basically like we've overlapped a little bit from where we started. I'm going to do a little lock stitch and cut my thread. Okay, so now I'm going to come over here and I can take all of these extra pins that held my fabric where I wanted it to be out. Put it back in my pin cushion. And then we're going to fluff some stitches. Okay, this zigzag, like we do for quilt binding, we use this, and for lots of other little things, but especially the bindings. What happens is the fibers get stuck under here, underneath the threads. With the black thread, you can't really see it, but you can a little bit. But if I go ahead and I take this little stiletto, and I kind of do a little scritch thing with it, it'll pull them out of those fibers. So here where they hang out, I'm going to cover those stitches up so it just becomes much more natural, for lack of a better word there. So I'm just going to scritch this up, and I'm going to do this the whole way around, and it will get all of these fibers up and hide that edge. So you can see what that looks like compared to what that looks like. So this is after it's been fluffed, and this is before. Okay? So it does look a little bit different. I think it looks a lot different. It looks a lot better once it's been scritched up. Okay? We're sort of going to go around that whole thing to make it all nice. All right? So now, there we go. Look at that. Okay, so that is it. Ta-da! Boom! Done. All right? So if you want to, you can do other things to it. All right. You can quilt in it, and if you wanted to, there's no reason to. The only reason you would want to quilt it is to hold it together more, to add some detail to it if you wanted. This is a great project for doing, and I didn't get time to do an embroidery example, but this is one that you can do an embroidery in the middle. You could do an embroidery in the back, and I've seen that. And then they have like a fun thing over here. So like for this example, if you had like a motorcycle embroidery design, you could stick that on the back, and then on the front is the actual motorcycles. Like that sort of thing works really well. So you could add in that direction as well. This side's going to bother me because it's really fluffy and it's sticking out badly. But otherwise, at this point, you're done. So that's the great thing about this project, is that's all it needs. Okay, so let me show you. I know, look how stuck down it is, and how much better it looks when it's fluffed. Okay. So you can also sew these corners, and I'm going to do a couple of corners just to show you the difference. So I'm going to show you those real quick. You can see it from that side. It is all good. I'm just going to stick this back in here because I know this is a favorite for a few folks I know, because these corners tend to pop just a little bit. Here's a really good, we can show this one. You can see how like puffy that is. You can see like it sticks out, and we want to get that flat. We don't have to do this, and I actually rarely do, but I know a lot of people who do. So what I'm going to do is I just changed it to a straight stitch. I'm going to pop it up to a 3.5 so it goes fast. Do a little lock stitch and just sew down that seam basically.
You're in the ditch.
I'm basically sewing in the ditch. I can't really see or feel,
so
I'm just aiming for the corner is what I'm doing. And now that holds it nice and flat. So if you look at the difference between these two, you can see this holds it really flat. Okay. So if we move these over here so we can see the difference if I lay them down. Oops. Trim that thread. So this one will lay down. This one is a little bit puffy. Okay, so it just makes a slight difference, but I know a lot of people like to do this, and then you can fluff it, and you can't really see it from the back either. Okay, so that's what the back looks like with all of that. And the same thing goes back here. If you want to, you can fluff this. Okay, if you don't, I think it looks totally fine. It's no big deal. All right, ta-da. Any questions on that? Okay, good, good. Okay, so let me show you a couple little insights. All right. My pile of stuff here. Hold on. Okay. So one, here's a little trick for if you want to make, so if you decide you want to make a bunch of these, say you're going to make 6 of them or 10 of them for your grandkids for Christmas, and you just want to whip them out. The hardest thing, hard is, you know, maybe not the right word for it, but the most time-consuming thing is definitely that corner thing and trying to draw all the corners. So what I found is that if I take, and I'm going to see if I got this, I think this one is actually a corner. Let's see, I did. I made it straight. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw this out.
What material is that?
It's just paper, like cardstock, like a manila folder that was clearly scrap. Okay. So just something with a little oomph to it, basically. So I wouldn't do this necessarily out of the interfacing like I use for patterns a lot, because I want this to have some strength, because I'm going to use it over and over again. So I'm pretending that this is the corner of my blanket. And I'm going to draw the line that goes through. So now what I have, so this is a 2-inch border. So I'm going to write that in here so I don't forget. And now I can go ahead and get my, where's my paper one? It's my paper rotary cutter, and I'm just going to cut this off. So now I've made myself a little template. So if I want to use, say, this fabric, I have this cut into a square already. I want to make a 2-inch border. I'm just going to put this up into the corner. I'm going to hold it real nice and tight. And I'm going to draw my line. Okay, so now I have the line. I can just fold this up, pin it, and sew here. Okay, so that's a little trick if you're going to do a bunch of them. If you're going to do one every once in a while, it's not necessary that you need to make yourself a pattern. But I know that when I've made a bunch of them, it's really easy to have this because then I can sort of churn them out a little bit faster. Okay, and so that's a little helpful secret.
Production tips.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So rose cuddle, this is one that I had that I was going to show you a couple of different things. So this is one that I almost made this one today and then we didn't, but I decided to do the motorcycles instead. But this is a new little one that we have that would work really well with this. The rose cuddle works really nicely. This is one that is cut with a rotary cutter. So you can see there's the little backing bits. So this is one that I would definitely use a matching thread as well, because all of those areas where you can see the backing fabric, you don't really have anything to fluff over that. So you want to use a matching thread to make sure that that hides in there. Okay.
I'm going to go back to a sewing question real quick. I thought it was interesting. How much different is it sewing cuddle on a sewing machine that does not have a walking foot?
Very different. Very, 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 very different. Really, because what happens when you're working with a machine without the walking foot is you don't have anything helping you bring the fabric through. And so the fabric is so thick that it kind of like will bunch up in the front of the foot is what happens. If you don't have a walking foot, we recommend that you buy a walking foot. But the other thing is that you can lighten the presser foot pressure and then pull it through. You just have to have more... I'm not sure what the right word is. Like, you have to have more involvement in bringing the fabric through. It's not going to feed through itself. A walking foot works really, really well. This one works with a belt, but a walking foot generally what it will do is it has kind of like feed dogs, but on the top. So you have feed dogs on the bottom that bring the fabric through, and you've got some grabby bits on the top that will kind of grab the fabric and bring it, and then it sets back over and it drags it through. So it really pulls the fabric through at an even speed. And that's really important. If your feed dogs are the only thing pulling the fabric through, you're trying to pull this stuff through at the same time. So it's not going to be as accurate, it's not going to work as nicely, and it's certainly going to be a lot harder than it would be with a walking foot. I know that they are sometimes a little bit of an investment, but they're definitely worth it because you use it for so much more than just cuddle. I know a lot of people, I use mine for a lot of different sewing, especially like for bags or for anything that has some thickness to it. It makes a huge difference. So yeah. It is a different beast. Okay, so I recommend getting a walking foot for it. So I showed you the digital cuddle is what we use today. That was what I just showed you with the penguin. You can also use our gauze. Okay, the way I like to use the gauze is with 2 layers. So traditionally in the pattern it has you do it this way and put this in. What I found is if I do a layer of gauze behind it, so I'm going to put this up. So this is just white gauze behind it, okay, that I'm putting in here. I'm going to lay them together, and I'll put that here. Actually, if I lay it like here, you can see. You could probably see that in the camera too, right? The difference between these two. So if I put a layer of white behind it, and I just use gauze because it's going to be the same substrate, it's going to work the same way, and they stick together really nicely. When you wash the 2 gauzes, they kind of... the fibers kind of blend a little bit more, and they really do start to work as one piece. This makes a big difference, and I just feel like this looks nicer. It also has a little bit more heft because it's 2 layers. So if you're going to do a gauze, which is a great idea, it's super fun and works really well, try to do it with 2 layers. So do it with the white behind it and see if you like that. I like the way that it makes the colors pop, makes them a lot more true. So there's another little tip for you.
I'm gonna pull back on this.
Oh.
The rose.
Rose cuddle.
Yep. How do you figure out which direction the nap is going, and do you care?
I don't care.
That's what I thought you were gonna say.
You can tell if you cut it with the rotary cut or with the blade. You'll be able to see which one falls one direction more than the other. It doesn't really matter. The only thing you would want to do is make sure you know which way is widthwise and lengthwise. So this is my widthwise because it stretches. This is my lengthwise because it doesn't. So that would be the only thing that you would sort of check. So if I was trying to get a one to match, and you want to try to match the direction of the nap, even if you don't know which direction is up or down, you know it's running this direction, and that your inside fabric would run the same direction so that they work together nicely. Otherwise, you've got one that stretches and one that doesn't, and it's not gonna lay as nice. Okay, so we want to keep those going in the same direction, even if it's just up and down. All right,
Got it.
Good question. All right, so we talked a little bit about using C3, and so I have a few things that I want to show you about that. So this is a little sample that I did, and you're going to work your way around this, okay, Hawk? Okay, so where did I do the zigzaggy? Oh, this is right here, is this side. So this is a zigzag, which doesn't really look like it, but it is. And it's just a 4 wide zigzag is what I did. Okay, so that's what this side is a 4 zigzag. This is where I was talking about that it starts to get, you can see the shove right here. Can you see those bits? Where they sort of, what's the right word? They sort of start to build on itself.
There's like ripples.
It's like a ripple. There's the right word. Okay, and I can get it to, like, if I lay it out nice. But you can see it still wants to behave funny here. And that's because it got pushed. So what I have found is working with the C3, the Cuddle 3, when I use a zigzag, it pushes it more than otherwise. And I think that part of that is my fault because I like to sew faster. If I have a zigzag, I can sew fast. And so it tends to shove the fabric forward is what's happening. And so then you get, oh, see, there's the ripples showing up. Okay, so you'll end up getting these ripples, and that's a very, very common thing that happens. So there's a couple of ways of tackling that. One is to not sew so fast. The other is that if you get those ripples, even if you're pinning really well and you're sewing nice and slowly and you're getting these little ripples in here, you can just top stitch it. So that's what this is. I just did a straight stitch at a 3.5 millimeters, and I just top stitched it a 1/4 inch from the edge. Okay, and you can see that that gives it a nice crisp little edge, and it definitely flattens this. So I've used that trick a lot of times to get it to flatten down. As I'm sewing it, I'm going to keep a nice tug on it so this edge will stay nice and straight and do my seam. Okay.
And you do that after the zigzag.
After the zigzag. So especially if you've done it and you're like, oh, I need to fix that. Don't take it out, just stitch it down. Okay, this is a different way of doing it. So this one I just did a straight stitch along here. Okay, this you can do. It's a little harder to get it perfect, and I can see that this is wider than it is over here, which isn't a huge deal, but it's harder to get it perfectly even. You also end up getting this little lip. Okay, so if this gets tugged at all, it's going to curl, so it'll start to curl up. So one of the things that I don't particularly love about this is that you get this little edge on here, which I don't like, and it's hard for me to keep that straight. So I'd rather do other stitches. But this is also top stitched, which I just think adds a really nice, so not only does it keep it flat, it also just makes it look nicer. I feel like this looks nicer than this. Okay, so that's just it's just a personal preference, but I really do like the top stitch on the C3. I think it adds something. I'll show you in another spot too. Okay, so this one, I think this was the Faggoting cross stitch. So you can see that it does this like do 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 do. So a lot of times when you do this sort of stitch, you're doing it over a space. But this one, what I liked about it is that it smashes it flat. So any sort of decorative stitch that you have, this is sort of like a big X-y sort of thing. Any sort of stitch that you like, give it a try on here, because what it did is just flatten this area. And I used the gray on here, which you can sort of see. So if you wanted it to really mush in, you could use a coordinating thread. You could probably use a totally different thread, like a white in here would be a totally different look and might be a look that you're going for. So you can give it a shot. Okay, so that's just that's a decorative stitch that smashes it flat along the edge, which I like. So then along here, if we move on down, we'll see I did some top stitch here. So you can see what that looks like. So same stitch, I just did it all along the side, and then I did a top stitch there. And I really like the way this looks. Like, this is probably one of my favorites so far on the Cuddle 3. And then over here, I did a serpentine, because the serpentine a lot of times we use on things, and it looks pretty interesting along this edge. And then I did a top stitch up there in the serpentine. So this is another one that you could just sort of pick and choose what you like. This one I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. It was a 4 wide and a 1.8 long. So I made it a little bit narrower than I have done before, because sometimes this becomes a problem, because in each one of these there's a little loose spot where the backing is. Okay, so if I make this a little bit narrower, it doesn't pop up quite as much. All right, does that make sense? Do we have any questions there? Are people okay? Did everybody leave? You're still there, right?
Oh, everybody's still there. Yeah, we're doing great.
Okay, let me show you the back.
Scroll up and see if I can catch up with some comments.
Okay. All right, so here's example of the back. So I think this looks really nice. This looks really nice on the back. The serpentine is beautiful. Okay, the zigzag, I just think the zigzag is kind of weird on the C3, and I don't know exactly why, but because it works so well in the luxe. It works so well. And this is with the decorative stitches and the serpentine. All right, so you can see how those turn out. And I think the top stitch on there looks so good. Makes me very happy. Okay. All right, here's another little quick example. This is with the rose cuddle. And this one you can see, so this one I did before, and you can see that the fibers don't quite pop up the way that they do in some of the other ones. So, but the rose cuddle is really good for this project, just in general. It's just a nice one. You can see the zigzag stitches back here, and this one I used a print cuddle, just a regular print cuddle. So this one is also a digital, which is my favorites of all the national parks. Okay. Oh, then we get into some more funky ones, all right? So this one is done with weave. And I got some stuff stuck down in the corner. I'll pop those guys up. This one is a little bit different because it has this texture in it that looks like it was knitted already. So the thing that I did with this that's important that you're going to do a little bit differently is that when you cut it, you're going to cut it along the line of the fabric. So I'm going to show you, like on the back here, if I were cutting this out, I would cut between these little lines first, then I measure my square. So what I did when I cut mine is I cut the line, and then I measured over whatever it was, 20 inches, and I cut between the line on this side. Okay, let me see if I had a piece. Here we go. Here's a different one. So let me give you an example. Is that if I were trying to cut a 20-inch square out of this, I would cut it from this side. And generally speaking, I will always tell you to cuddle from the back side. But this side, I want to make sure that it's coming right along between those lines. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball it and go between the lines of the fabric. Okay, and then I've got it straight. Because what happens is if we cut it from this side, and I just draw a square, I have no idea how this is. And I've done that before, and what you end up with is a cut side that is, generally speaking, more like this. So you end up with these wibbly wobbly edges that will get weird. Okay, and they look weird on the side because you fold it over and then that's not straight. It's weird. So it'll do these things where you're like, but that's...
They run off the edge, yeah.
They run off the edge. And so what you want to do is first cut your line. So cut from the outside or from the right side, you're going to cut the lines on either side and then make it straight. Okay, so this is a little bit funky, but I do like the way it looks. I think it's really, really pretty. And we have this one in a whole bunch. We use the chenille, which is the same version of this. We used that, was it last week we did the cupcakes? I think so. So when we did the cupcakes, we used the chenille for the bottom. It's the same sort of stuff, and you're going to use those lines for that. The same goes with the Brooklyn. There was a couple others, the Paloma. Any of them that have lines in them, make sure that you cut those from the front first, okay? Anything else I wanted to tell you about that? That's just a nice zigzag. Did you get a zoom in on the top stitching there?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's just a big zigzag in the gray. That's all I did. Worked out great. I think it looks nice. I'll show you the back. Got some gray fuzz on there. Okay, looks beautiful. This is seriously one of my favorites. I love the color and I love the sort of modeledness of it. Okay, here is one that was done with, this is I think Heather. And this is just one layer of the gauze. So you can sort of see the blue coming up through the back of it, but this is a really lovely border too. Okay, so you can pick all sorts of colors, and you can see we kind of chose in different ways of which colors to emphasize. And this is the same. Let me show you the back of that. Okay, the zigzag just sort of hides in there and goes away. All right, really beautiful. So then I did another one where I decided I would throw some luxe in there. I had someone do this at a class that I taught, and I was like, oh, that's really pretty. So that's what I did here. So this is the Snowy Owl, I believe, and this is Glacier. So these were just, you know, two of them that coordinated, and we put those together, and it's just such a, I don't know, it's a more luxurious blanket this way with the Luxe Cuddle in here. The one that the woman did in class, she actually did it with two versions of white, and I think she did like the Snowy Leopard or something in here, and then a big fluffy white, and she did it for like a christening blanket or something. It was beautiful, beautiful. So I think that there's, like, we know how many Luxe Cuddles there are, 1,000,000,001. So we have a ton of possibilities with this one.
Do you know what color this was by any chance? It was not showing up super well on the camera.
It is a periwinkle color. Ellen, do you know what color that is? Or she doesn't? I want to say it was like elderberry or something.
And she was thinking it might be cornflower.
Oh. Oh, now that sounds right. Okay. Like, I did order the fabric. I'm the one who placed the order, and cornflower sounds right. It's kind of a periwinkle color. It's super pretty, but right, it's like a kind of a blue purple.
It's got a little purpliness to it.
Yeah.
Maybe not showing up great on phone cameras, but
sorry.
Here we are.
But it's beautiful. It's one of my favorites. I think it's so pretty. We also have, I feel like I had another one here. That's this one here. That's that same fabric too. Okay. And it's really, I love this one. This is the one I want to try to make a sweater out of. I think it'd be super cute. Yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah, Ellen says that was correct. Okay. So then also you can do, so you could see here, there are different size borders, right? Okay. So this is a wider border. This is a thinner border. You can do them any size. I think this is a 1.5 and this is a 2. What we did on the other one was a 2. This is a little bit smaller. This is actually 1.25 is what I did this one with. Okay. And this one, do you want me to tell the story of this little quilt block? So I always tell people that you can use this like for your orphan blocks. It's like if you have made a quilt or you started making a quilt and then you got 4 blocks in and you were like, I am not doing this quilt. This is a great place to put it because then you can just quilt up those 4 blocks and stick it in there. I have had this piece that I made. I don't even know who the fabric is by. It's been so long. Like literally I made this that was going to be the start of a quilt for my nephew when he was like 5 and he turns 18 next week. So I never quite finished it, to say the least. It has sat there, and it actually sat there basted to some very thick batting. For years, it has sat in that box. And I just keep thinking, I'm going to finish it, but I have to find some coordinating fabric. And this fabric is, you know, now like 12 years old. So it's not findable. So I never did finish it. So anyway, I just stuck it in here. What I did is a little bit different. So you can absolutely stick this in here. Any sort of cotton can go in here. Totally fine. You can put flannel in here, and I have to try one of those sometimes because I don't have a flannel one. But I left this corner so you could see how I did it. And I just made it a little bit bigger because my block was made to have 1/4 inch seam allowance. I knew that if I had it come over 1 inch, it was going to take off the bulk of my triangles up there, and I didn't want that to happen. So I basically just added a section here so that I would be able to take it over 1/4 inch and do the top stitching. Okay, so then I didn't lose all of my points up here. Some of them, but not all of them. And it made it so that it seemed better because it was closer to the right seam allowance, okay? So all I did is I basted it onto some of the Quilter's Dream Poly. I basted it on. You could absolutely quilt it and then put it in here. I wasn't sure I would have time if I quilted it to be able to get it finished, so I just quilted some while I was in here. There it is. It's really hard to see in here. So there are 3 lines of quilting. You guys can see it a little bit better than I can see it in person even, which is kind of funny. So there are a few that I did 3 of them. The reason I quilted this is because I have the batting in there, and batting has to be quilted. So batting will fall apart if it's not quilted, so I needed to quilt it, keep it in position, make sure it doesn't fall apart. But this is absolutely a way that you can finish, you know, this is totally the size of like 4 blocks, Or if you wanted to finish a larger quilt this way, you could as well. You can also do, we were talking about on the I Love Cuddle group, which if you're not a part of, you should be, how you can do this with a strip quilt. So you can put the strip quilt together on the batting and then finish it as a self-binding blanket, which I have to try because that sounds great. Okay, the last one I'm going to show you is this guy. This is made with the Brooklyn. This is the one that taught me to cut it on the line first, because if you look here, I did not. So start over here. You could see that it's pretty even. It's kind of right between the rows, and then I start to lose it because even though it was cut straight, it wasn't cut straight on the line. So over here, I've completely lost that third row that was over there. So it just makes it look a little bit funky. Okay, that was where I learned, like, oh, that will happen. Okay, so that's the way these things always work. But this is the Brooklyn, which is super fun. It also has like a real knitted appearance to it, which I think is super great. And this makes a fun one. It's just one that you want to make sure that you cut it on the lines of it. Okay.
I think I want a jumper out of that.
Yeah, it's super great, right? And this is just a panel. So if you have any panels that you want to use and you don't know what to do with, this is a great way of doing it because all you need is a piece of fabric that's just a little bit bigger. This is only an inch border, so it's very small. And I just made it an inch all the way around bigger. I basted it on with the spray baste, and then I stuck the panel in. Okay. So super, super simple. Just makes for an easy little blanket. Okay. So any little panel you have in there totally works. This is not quilted and it's come apart over, you know, it sitting there in my pile of samples, but you can see it just holds right back together again just fine. So you don't actually have to quilt it to hold it together because this is a larger one. And if it was going to come apart, this is be when it would, you know, sort of want to separate. So that works really well too. So that's where I learned my lesson on cutting on the line. Ellen had a question for me. Do I have any tips for sewing with llama cuddle? A stiletto. Stiletto. The llama cuddle is longer and actually does make a really good self-binding blanket. But what you want to do is make sure that you push it down. Let me show you really quick. So this is the llama. Glad I just have a sample just hanging out here.
That was pretty good.
So we're going to pretend this is the inside of my blanket. And this is going to be the top. Wouldn't that be pretty? Look at that. It's gorgeous. Okay. As you're sewing, as you're top stitching this down, because you're going to zigzag this edge, you're going to have to be really careful because the backing is in other places. So like some of the other ones. But what you're going to do is you're just going to push this down as it feeds underneath the foot. And you can see the stiletto just completely disappears in all of that fluff. Okay. Okay. Super, super cute. All right, but really easy to do. You just have to hold this down and shove it underneath. Not really shove it, but you're holding it down as it goes under the feet. If you're using a traditional walking foot, it'll have like the toes that come up, and what happens is this gets stuck in those. So you have to keep that down right in front of the foot. All right, that's the biggest thing. So if you want to use the llama cuddle, which is super cute, and we have it in, you know, lots of colors. I'm totally making a jacket out of this at some point. But use the stiletto. The stiletto will make a big, big difference with it. Okay. I feel like she had one more question. Oh, where was the panel from? The panel was from Blue Bar Quilts when I was teaching out there in, I'm not even sure where Blue Bar is. And I don't remember who made the panel. It's a cotton panel from Riley Blake, Wyndham, I don't know. Somebody, it was cute. Hawk really likes space stuff, so I bought it. You know, because that's the way I do things, you know. Come on, you guys know how it is, right? You show up in the fabric store, you're like, oh, I know somebody who'd like that. I should buy it. I just need an excuse. That's all it was. So it just happened to be a panel, and I thought, oh, that would be cute, and it'd be a sample that, you know, I might use. So, and it's also glow in the dark, which is kind of fun. So it's a great use for it. I have a couple other panels that I've done that with, and I really do like the way that works. So it's a great way to put those to use. You can also use flannel in there, works really well. You can just use, like I said, pieced pieces. You can use quilted pieces, all sorts of stuff. It's a very, very versatile project. As you can see, there's lots of stuff. We'll take some pictures and make sure we add some more information to this so you can kind of access it. But it's really super flexible, easy to do pattern. The only thing that you need to make sure that you're doing is that outside piece has to be a cuddle fabric. Otherwise, the inside piece, that center panel, can be anything. All right, so it's really, really great. It's fun to do, and it's super useful for lots of different projects. Okay, Ellen has one more thing. Oh no, that's where the panel is from. Then we have a winner. So let me go find the winner. Hold on, I'm trying. It's a million little texts here to be like, make sure we answer it. Okay, so the winner is Sarah G, and she will win. And I actually do have the piece for the small one that we made yesterday. So if you want. So Sarah G, if you're there and you want the fabric for this one, let me know. Or if you want the fabric for this one, let me know. Okay, so I have fabric for either one of these and I can send them to you. Remember that tomorrow we're going to be back at the same time and we're going to be making a large one. So we're going to make, you know, approximately 50 by 60. We'll see what size it actually ends up being. But we'll make one of those tomorrow. We're going to do a little flip-flop. We're going to go between my studio and Huck's studio. It'll be super fun. I'll get to show you how we can manage a big quilt. So I'm looking forward to that. Don't forget to join us on the I Love Cuddle Fabric group that's here on Facebook. And you can find out from other people what they're doing and how to sew things and inspiration and all sorts of stuff. I love that group so much. It's a fun group of people. So join us there. You can also find all of our videos on YouTube and on Facebook. And I think that's it. We'll see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific. Till then, happy sewing.